It's independence season here in St. Kitts-Nevis. This time is historically paramount here in the Federation. It is the time when we celebrate our nation's self-governance as well as our national heroes who contributed significantly to our development. One such being the Right Honorable Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw, who is considered one of the Caribbean's greatest political leaders. His life's work is deeply woven into the fabric of our country's development. And fortunately, Glenroy Blanchette documented it in his book, The Truth About Robert L. Bradshaw, father of St. Kitts-Nevis independence. It gives us great pleasure to welcome Mr. Blanchette to the set of Good Morning SKN to discuss this and more. Welcome, Mr. Blanchette.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Certainly welcome. It is indeed our pleasure.
All right, so the title of the book, one of the things that jumps out, not only is the focus Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw, but the way that you crafted it, the title, The Truth About Robert L. Bradshaw. It leads me to question whether you believed in writing this book that there were certain misconceptions that people had or certain things that they did not understand about RLB. Is that true?
Yes, certainly. Initially, my intention was to write about his greatness. But during the research process, I came to the realization that there was still a lot of misconceptions about Robert Bradshaw, our first national hero, his life, his contribution to our development. And so during that period, doing the research, a suggestion was made that, hey, focus on the lies and the propaganda and the half-truths and challenge, those aspects. And so that is why the name came about.
All right, if I may ask a follow-up question, because this is a very interesting line of conversation. And again, we're talking about the truth. What was one of those things that you noticed to be a misconception that you definitely wanted to tackle right off the bat in that book?
Well, first and foremost, and it's still alive today, you hear people uttering the phrase, bones in rice and pepper in soup. That it was alleged that Bradshaw made those statements towards Nevisians and Angolians, that he would give them bones in their rice and pepper in their soup. And there is no evidence whatsoever that he made such statements. No one can tell you when and where he uttered those words.
So you've done the research, you found it a misconception that you've addressed.
Yes.
Understood.
Wow. Such a great book. How easy or how hard was it for you to put this book together?
Honestly, it wasn't difficult at all.
Okay.
Because the research process became a labor of love. And the more I found out, the more I wanted to, discover more about the greatness of this man. And so it was a sort of enlightenment for me, and also in some respect a sort of an atonement, given my history, growing up in a community that supported the People's Action Movement, my family, my neighborhood, supported the People's Action Movement to the hilt. And so at an early age, I was indoctrinated, and believed, that Bradshaw was a wicked man, so to speak. So it was a labor of love.
Well, this is interesting that you made that point, because you've been a political figure,
Yes.
As you rightly said, supporting the People's Action Movement. So for you to craft a book focusing on Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw is quite interesting, to say the least. Mm-hmm. What were some of the challenges that you faced in doing that, and what were some of the truths that you think you had to confront in doing
that? Quite many. Another example was the 1967 attempted coup d'etat. For a long while, I believed that that never happened. It is only when I became a card-carrying member and political candidate for the People's Action Movement, then I began to discover a lot of the truth behind that episode in our history. And so my perception, of Ham and Bradshaw and so on, came to a head, came face to face with the reality of what I was experiencing, as a member of the People's Action Movement. And so I had to confront those perceptions. And the research process was so enlightening as I discovered a lot of the issues surrounding the 1967 coup d'etat. Even the Anguillians made certain admissions in a few of the books that they wrote.
There's a lot of history, a lot of revelation that a lot of us perhaps...
Right. And to add to that also, Dr. Whitman Brown, a Nevision scholar, author, he wrote one of the first books about Robert Bradshaw, From Commoner to King. And he too came to the same conclusion, that Bradshaw was misunderstood. He wasn't the evil person that people made him out to be. And, he at first was a critic, but eventually came around to loving Robert Bradshaw. So I am not alone.
Okay.
See, when you begin to discover the truth, then you get a different perspective of things.
I suppose you're motivated to share that as well.
Certainly.
So now that you bring this to fore, do you think it is of utmost important that our history, Kittitian history, not just European history, be taught in schools so that this generation and the others will be thoroughly informed when they are making, let's say, a voting decision or any other decision pertaining to our stalwarts?
Excellent question, because it is Marcus Garvey who said that a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. And so our history provides that foundation for us to build upon moving into the future. And if we don't understand where we came from, we will be always spinning top in the mud. And so this book, like many others, trying to fill that gap where in the past our history was written by Europeans. And so what I found to here locally is that many of the Labour Party stalwarts and so on never took the time to record the achievements of Bradshaw and Labour. And so it is important that we record. It doesn't have to be the Labour Party, any party, the People's Action Movement, CCM, NRP, any party, that there must be some written record of the achievements and so on, so that we can pass that information on to future generations.
Now let's listen to him as he reads a bit of his book for us. Take it away, Mr. Blanchette.
Thank you. This section deals with an experience that Robert Bradshaw had in the 1940s. He was traveling around the country doing some work for the Union. And when he arrived at Newton Ground, he saw a taxi. Well, he took a taxi to Newton Ground. And he saw a lady trying to catch a taxi to take her two children to the school in Sandy Point. And he gave her a penny and told the daughter to buy a penny bread, break it in half, and share it with her brother. And that incident moved him, and so he penned a piece in the Union Messenger. And it goes like this. To the interested observer, interested in the welfare and uplift of these poor people, who is not unacquainted with the living conditions forced upon the laboring classes of his island, conditions which are in themselves, to say the least, horrible, degraded, and disintegrative as compared with modern standards. This spectacle of little children being compelled to live for the better part of the day on a meal of 1 3/4 of an ounce of bread would occasion no surprise, but the contrary should, with pity, pierce him to the innermost fibers of his heart and depress him with disgust and indignation for the system which, by its very modus operandi, stultifies the minds, and undernourishes the bodies of the great majority of our children, even before birth, condemns them to premature death, as our alarming shows, makes them hardly able to learn, and thereby unfit for hardly any other occupations than the most menial in the community.
That is a loaded statement.
Yes, and that incident, in my opinion, propelled him to be a part of the struggle to ameliorate the conditions of the poor masses of the country.
That was what he's known for, indeed.
Yes, and
Yes.
do you think Mr. Bradshaw was instrumental behind the school meal programs?
Not necessarily, not necessarily. School meal programs came much after,
Oh, okay.
much later on.
Okay.
But he certainly influenced a lot of the modern development, that our country experienced.
Absolutely right. And when we talk to the conditions that he spoke to, I couldn't help but be moved when you read that. It was just a snippet. And earlier I asked you if you had a favorite chapter, and you said something that I suppose any author would, which was you don't have a favorite chapter. There are certain things that stand out to you. Is there any other part that stands out to you?
There are many accounts of his response to a lot of situations. For example, when he was ill and he was hospitalized in England, the story is told that the Queen visited him and wanted to confer on him a knighthood, and Bradshaw refused. He said all he wanted in life was independence for his people. So things like that, suggest to us, hey, this man was truly ahead of his time.
Indeed. Especially at that period. You're absolutely right, because that is when we wanted self-determination. And he was a champion for that, and that's really important.
There's another part where, I don't know if you saw the movie Malcolm X.
A very long time ago.
Right, and there was a point in that movie where the police arrested a few of the Black Panthers, I think, are Muslims, and the crowd assembled outside the police station, and Malcolm X gave a signal with his hand, for them to disperse and so on. And there was an incident involving Bradshaw as he was leading the struggle against the planters. There was a 10-week strike, and they put down their cutlasses and so on and did not show up for work for 10 long weeks. And Bradshaw, eventually, when they were assembled, he said, he made the announcement, comrades, out your flambeaux, meaning the torches. And like a mighty wind came from nowhere, and all the torches were put out. That is the kind of command and respect that he had amongst the masses. Yeah.
So tell us about the feedback from your readers. What are they saying about the book?
Excellent, excellent. I was a bit taken aback by the response. I knew there would have been some good response to it. A few people suggested that this body of work is worthy of a PhD award. That is as far as it goes. But my real concern, though, is getting out the word so that people can understand who our first national hero was.
And that's very important indeed. As a matter of fact, I can see why they would say that about it, because just the way that you're expressing the contents and the knowledge that you've acquired in doing your research speaks to a certain level of information that is important to get out there indeed. So I can appreciate that. For those who are watching us right now, where can they purchase the book?
It's on Amazon. It's also available locally. I have copies selling. And so on Amazon, it's what, $19.99. Locally, you can get it for $50 easy. So anyone can contact me. My number is 662-6268.